Hi guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat, episode 401, featuring part 2 of my interview with the fabulous Steve Ince. In this part of the interview, we really start talking about gameplay versus narrative, or I guess how the two should go together, some different techniques that different adventure games have used over the years, sometimes well, sometimes not so well. We talk about the rise, again, of full motion video cutscenes. We talk about, let's see what else, walking simulators, the tendency to have more scenes than gameplay, and then just about everything from Life is Strange to Sam and Max to the Monkey Island games. If you like adventure games, I think you'll really, really enjoy this episode. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover, so without further ado, here is Steve Ince. So, again, coming back to this 10 years ago interview. It was really good. I loved that, your response to these things. But one of the things that came up was some games we were asking you. What were some games that you really think nailed this relationship between the gameplay, mechanics, and the story? And you mentioned, I think you're kind of humble about, you didn't want to mention your own games too much, so you said Grim Fandango and Psychonauts really impressed you in that regard. I was just wondering, has there been games since then that maybe you feel like have eclipsed those, or do you still hold those up as the masterpieces? I mean, Life is Strange, for example.
Life is Strange is a game I've been meaning to play for ages now, and I feel a bit embarrassed that I haven't done so. But then there are just so many good games.
Too many, yeah.
You know, I downloaded a game actually just this afternoon called Churchill.
Shirt like the Prime Minister?
Churchill, something like that. It's by the guys who did Machinarium.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that.
I think it's only just come out. But it's absolutely wacky. You know, and there's no dialogue. They're just the creatures on screen just make noises, you know, it's a bit, you know, but it's brilliantly done. And I've only played a bit of it so far, but I'm looking forward to getting back to that. But, you know, sort of like, in a sense, I think that there are all sorts of games that are handling story and gameplay together very well. I mean, there's been a lot of interesting adventures in that time since. I mean, obviously, I think The Whispered World was quite good. I mean, I only did script editing on the English translation from the German, but I think that was quite a nice, you know, sort of like tale, told in a bit of a melancholy way in some respects. But I think that worked quite well. I wouldn't say it was quite up there with Grim Fandango or Psychonauts, but it still was a good game. One game I liked fairly recently was oh my god, give me a moment and I will find this damn thing. I've forgotten the title of it. Subsurface Circular by Mike Bithell, who really impressed me with his first game, Thomas Was Alone, which is fantastic. I mean, Thomas Was Alone it really kind of combines. Is another game that really combines the gameplay with the narrative in a very good way. So I think there are all sorts of different games doing this well. You got odd little things as well, like Night in the Woods, which I'm still trying to categorize in some ways, because it's such an unusual game. And I
love a game. I love a game that's hard to categorize. I mean, that's that's innovation.
Exactly. I think that, and we're seeing a lot of this, aren't we? We're seeing a lot of these unusual games. I mean, you mentioned Life is Strange, I mean, that was one of the things that it was, it gained critical acclaim for, was the fact that it took a different approach, didn't it, to the storytelling and everything. And which is, why it's a bit shameful of me not to have played it yet. But sort of like, and then of course you've got the stuff done by Dave Gilbert, and his games, which sort of like, I know they have a very kind of like old-fashioned look to them because of the small, the chunky pixel look, but at the same time, sort of like the characters are so well rounded, and you feel as though you're moving into that world to investigate these stories and the problems that the characters have to overcome and such. And again, it's kind of like Broken Sword in that sense. These are most of the characters in those games are fairly ordinary. I mean, okay, we've got a ghost in the in the Blackwell games, haven't we? But apart from that supernatural element, I mean, they're fairly ordinary, everyday characters, and relatable again, and it comes down to that. And I think that they're, sort of the problems are relatable in many respects.
He's found a really interesting niche there. Sort of like the the equivalent of like the indie films for adventure games. Because I guess I just always think about his games and how they would have flown back in the, I guess late 80s or 90s.
I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? Sort of like, I'd like to think that at least some of them would have held their own ground, against, sort of like Beneath Steel Sky or Monkey Island or some of those, sort of like similar looking games, if you like. I mean, you look at something like Shardlight, and that feels much more like an early 90s game than perhaps the Blackwell games do. Sort of, and I think that that has a good feel to it. And I think, I mean, when I say it feels like an early 90s game, I don't mean that in any sort of rude way. I mean,
well, that can only be considered praise on this channel.
Sort of like it does fit. I think that it really does fit alongside the likes of Beneath Steel Sky and The Dig and Monkey Island and all those. It's kind of, it has that, this is where it almost belongs kind of thing. And of course the writing is good on all Dave's games. And I think that whenever I've spoken to Dave, he's been very modest about his writing. But I think, well, probably we all are a bit, I suppose. But I like what he's doing, and I like the kind of characters he's creating and that. I mean, I know that Shardlight isn't wholly him, is it? I think that was developed by somebody else and he published it or something. But I don't know. It's difficult to keep track.
He probably does as much work improving other people's games than he does right. Maybe even more so in that.
Probably, yes. Yes, he's certainly works hard, doesn't he?
Well, before we move into the past, I guess I was just kind of curious, as somebody who also does a lot of comics, what your thoughts are on these Telltale games, especially the Walking Dead. To me, those to me play more like interactive comics almost than anything else, and I've really been kind of struck by the way they look. It's just kind of a weird, I mean, in a good way weird, but it just feels different to me than most, like a standard point and click.
Yes. Mixed feelings about some of their games. I think they've done some really good ones, and I think others are less good. Because maybe they've just not quite hit the nail on the head. I mean, when they did Sam and Max, I don't think it quite matched the earlier game, the 90s game. Not because of the visual style. I just don't think the writing was as sharp. And, sort of like that's always going to be difficult, isn't it, to try and follow on with something like that. And I think it was brave of them to try, and I certainly enjoyed playing the games. But sort of like when you played, sort of like the original one, there's always going to be a bit of an unfavourable.
It's like trying to remake a beloved classic film or something, right? I mean,
yeah,
no matter how you might be different, but you're not going to. It's not going to rise above the original.
No. But then sort of like you've got like The Wolf Among Us and stuff like this, which they kind of evolved into a kind of style, didn't they? Sort of that regular episodic.
Yeah, that episodic thing I think is the real key.
Yeah, and they adopted a kind of specific visual style, didn't they? Which they carried out. Well, they used in The Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, and the Batman games, didn't they? All had that kind of similar style, which has a comic book look to it. So the fact that it has that look probably plays into your your idea of them, sort of like coming across like an interactive comic. And I think that they do play a bit like that, and certainly there's a lot less gameplay in them than perhaps most games would have, shall we say, or even most adventures. You don't seem to get the puzzle solving to quite the same degree, and there's a lot of quick time reactive interaction, isn't there, than particularly sort of like proper gameplay, we might say. Sorry, that sounds off, but
I think you hit the mark on that one.
But even so, sort of like the writing is good.
Oh yeah.
And the voice recording is good, and I think that sort of like, I wouldn't say that they were an ideal game, if you like, but I think they're good, and certainly I've a lot of good points to them. It's kind of like, but then sort of like it's there's always going to be an element, isn't there? We're going to go down this route, sort of it won't be to everybody's tastes, but sort of like we're sure that a lot of people will like it, and a lot of people do. So sort of they must be onto some kind of good thing if they get a lot of fans buying the games. So, which is ultimately, kind of like going to enable you to continue, isn't it? So, but then I think that we're getting, we're moving beyond what we might normally class as games and gameplay, aren't we? Sort of like we've got, sort of like I was involved with a game called The Bunker, which I thoroughly enjoyed being part of, and that used live action. Between some puzzles, you might get a fuse box puzzle or something like this, but then sort of like you come out of that, and then you've got the live action again, and that was filmed and produced really well by a company called Splendid Games, and sort of like you get involved with something like that, and it is almost like an interactive film. But it has some genuine gameplay in there as well, a bit more so I thought than the Telltale stuff. But still, maybe not quite the normal balance, But sort of it works well for that type of approach. And then you have got genuine interactive movies or videos or what have you. I mean, a friend of mine does something called Try Life, which is quite serious stuff. And these are interactive films aimed at younger people, not children, young children, but like sort of like mid-teens and upwards. And they cover some very serious issues, like drug taking and unplanned pregnancy, and sort of like problems with gangs, gang warfare and things like this, and it
kind of a public service kind of game, I guess.
No, not really, because it's kind of like it's allowing the player or the viewer, if you like, to make the choices. So it's kind of like, you know, do I go to the party or do I stay in and revise for the exam I've got tomorrow or something like this, you know?
Party.
And if you go to the party, do you drink or do you take drugs or do you go to bed with the, you know, the guy across the, you know, and so on. And so there's all this kind of stuff, you know, and it might lead, you know, the main character is a female, and it might lead to her becoming pregnant, or, you know, or having other troubles because she's taking the drugs and stuff like this. So there's this kind of like path through this maze of story bits, if you like, that you work your way through. And it's all about, you know, choice and consequence. I mean, it's not being judgmental. It's just saying, if you do this, there will be a consequence to that, you know. And it's fascinating stuff. I mean, the one on street gangs was filmed in London, where, you know, there is a serious problem with some of the gangs. And the first time I played through that, the main character, another female, was shot by one of the gang members and killed. And it's kind of like, wow. And it really upset me. You know, I just felt as though my choice had killed her. And I felt, you know, more connection to that than any game. And I don't know whether it was the fact that they were using real actors, or, you know, live action and so on, just up the connectivity, if you like, the empathy, or just, you know, the way that they'd set up the situation. So I think there are things to learn from these that we can then import into games. And I think that there's an awful lot going on that, you know, sort of like we need to be aware of as storytellers, that can help us tell better stories within games.
Yeah, that's a nice segue, because I was thinking about the various, I guess, narrative strategies, or your sort of toolbox, your narrative toolbox you have as you're working on adventure games. And clearly one way is the cutscenes. And you were talking about the full motion video or live action videos. And I must be one of the rare people that actually really enjoyed that little era of the live action adventure games. It seems like that's just kind of gone away. I guess there's a few people still doing it. I
think it's got the potential to come back in,
like the Tex Murphy games, for example.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at the Bunker, the way that has been done, I think they make a really good job of doing it. I think that the new Tex Murphy game that came out, was it a couple of years ago now? I don't think that
it feels like yesterday, but it's probably like 10 years ago.
But it's the one that they did
It was really, really good, though. I had a great time.
Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It was certainly better than the ones that they did in the 90s, but I still think it could have been better. I think, I don't know, there was just something about it that I felt as though I was just wandering around aimlessly. Mm-hmm. So it was the gameplay objectives that I thought had something wrong about them, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like I wasn't clear about what I should be doing at certain points, and it's kind of like, where do I go? What do I do? And I think that just
that happens to me all the time playing adventure games. So I mean,
yeah, but the thing was,
like, what the heck? What am I supposed to do? And you end up having to. Yes, I always hate that moment where you just give up and you have to go look at a walkthrough or something, and then you inadvertently always see something that you wanted to find out on your own. I mean, that's like the big challenge, I think, for designing these games. So what would you have told if those guys that come to you and consult, hired you to consult, what would you have told them?
Well, I think that one of the problems was that, you know, it was 3D, and so you're wandering around this 3D world. But I didn't really feel as though I understood the layout of that 3D world. It just seemed a bit, I don't know, unclear, you know, sort of. And I think that, you know, there were times when I was going down dead ends and looking for things, and there was hardly anything interactive in many of these areas. And I think that, and one of the things that, if you look back to the the older adventure games, say back in the early 90s. Now, they crammed an awful lot to do on every screen. And the reason was because you couldn't have too many screens because the games came out on floppy disks.
Yeah, this all had to fit on a couple of disks.
Yeah, you didn't want kind of like to fill a box full of like 100 floppy disks, did you? Because that would be silly. So, you know, sort of like you look at ways of maximizing the amount of interactivity within, you know, maybe 50 or 60 screens or something like this. And so you put, you know, sort of like you reuse screens. So an object that you need maybe later in the game, you might find in an earlier screen, and you might have to go back to it, you know, because you now know that you need that. And so there was a lot more. There was a greater interactive density, if you like. Whereas as soon as we started moving into 3D or even, you know, the fact that CDs gave us a lot more storage space meant that, you know, people were doing more, you know, putting in more screens or making environments much larger than they perhaps needed to be, which meant that the same amount of interactivity was spread out much thinner. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Siberia earlier, and I mean that was a game that you know, sort of like looked really good. I mean, the locations all look really nice, you know, sort of like the pre-rendered stuff. But the trouble was, they went a bit overboard with the number of pre-rendered screens. So there's some of those screens, all you were doing was walking through them. There was nothing to interact with. You were just walking through them because they looked pretty. And that to me wasn't a very valuable use of those locations.
So, it seems like you have a general principle here that maybe do more with fewer screens is better than just, hey, let's just add 100 extra scenes here. Made the game that much better, and not so much.
Yes. Well, I think that it's very easy. I mean, if you've got a big budget for an adventure game, which, you know, sort of like a number of the bigger games, you know, back in the mid-90s did have, then it's very tempting to say, oh yeah, let's throw 150 screens in here, and you know, and then it just runs away with itself a bit. Yeah, but we've only got, you know, sort of this amount of gameplay. We'll have to spread it across that. And this happened with Broken Sword 3 because we moved to 3D. We created a lot of large environments, and so, you know, so like you had to run around a bit to find, you know, the right dustbin that had the object in that you were looking for, and stuff like this. And I think that, you know, sort of like going back, I think, you know, with hindsight, I would make some of those locations a bit tighter, so you know, sort of like it didn't feel as though you were running around virtual. I mean, they were pretty, but you know, they were still fairly empty of interactivity. And I think that you know, we always need to be mindful of that.
One of the games, I don't know if you probably haven't played this one, Anna Capri, The Dream. You ever heard of that one?
Heard of it, yes.
I think that's got to be the worst transgressor of all time. And I mean, the guy it's basically like this series of, you know, it's all around the island. There must be like thousands of these scenes where literally it loads and you click to go to the next, next, and next. It's really more of a sightseeing thing than a game, in my opinion.
A bit like the what do they call them? Walking simulators.
Walking sim. That's exactly what it is. Beautiful scenery, but you know, it's just if that's what you're looking for, great. But the adventure game almost seems like sort of an afterthought.
Yeah. It frustrated me about, you know, the game Dear Esther. I don't know if you've played that. If playing is the right word, but there's virtually no interactivity in that. You know, you're just walking around, and at certain points you trigger a bit of voiceover and on-screen text. And, you know, so even interesting stuff like there's graffiti on the walls, or there's a picture on a notice board or something like this. You can't even interact with them, you know. And then there's a ship on the shore with all these crates littered about, you know. It's
can't open the crates.
Yeah, I can't even interact with the crates, let alone open them. You know, and I can't go inside the ship. You know, I can walk onto it, but I can't get inside it. And it's just like, you know, sort of like so many interactive possibilities just lost, and it's a real shame. Because the world, like the small world that they created for this, along the shore and everything, was gorgeous. But the interactivity was virtually zero. I just found that frustrating.
And that's all for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I should be back next week with the third installment of this, and I realize I'm a week late with this one, but just kind of got overwhelmed, so hopefully you guys didn't mind. A lot of really, really great stuff coming up in this interview. I mean, we just barely scratched the surface. I have at least 2, maybe 3 more of these episodes with Steve, because we had a really lengthy and very enlightening discussion. Anyway, you made it possible, so thank you very, very, very much, folks, for your support of this show. Entirely dependent on you guys for funding. No ads, nothing annoying here. Just folks like you that are supporting the show because you like the content. Now, if you want to sign up to support the show, remember, all I ask is $1 or $1 an episode, not too much. You can sign up at the Patreon site. It's a beautiful little site there. Or you can go to mattchat.us, and there's a couple different ways to support the show there. So anyway, some of you have already gotten your Matt Chat medallions. These are the super secret art project or collectibles I was talking about. It's a coin, or really a medallion. It's pretty big. Designed by Robbie. He did the artwork for this, worked on all the basically everything about the coin. All I did was give him some ideas for it. Anyway, it's a really, really awesome, nice, heavy, high-quality item. It even comes in a little drawstring pouch there. Now, a lot of people never gave me their address, believe it or not, so I wasn't able to send them the coin. So if you are one of those people and you'd like one of those, and maybe now that you know what it is, if you make it easy on me, it's kind of hard for me to go back into Patreon and find out who might have updated their address. So I'll just ask you if you can send me your information on YouTube. You could send a message that way, or just email me, mattmartin.exe@gmail.com. Anyway, just let me know who you are on Patreon or PayPal, and so I can check that and your address, and I'll ship you one of those. And also, if you're, a lot of folks were maybe $10, $15 shy of the $100 cutoff for these. So if you want one of these, you could just go to, say, PayPal and make up the difference that way. Again, just let me know what's going on. Tell me what your address is, and I'm happy to send it to you, but it's just kind of tricky working with that database. So just email me would be better. Okay, I think that'll do it for the, whatever we want to call that segment. What about that news from the Matt Cave? All right, got a couple items here from good old Stig. First up is that Simon the Sorcerer 1 and 2 25th Anniversary Edition is coming soon. They're going to update the control scheme, the graphics, new animations, and the option to mix and match all these new features with those of the original version. Simon is back and ready to point and click his way into infamy once more. So it's good news, I guess, for fans of the Simon games. The Simon the Sorcerer games don't seem to get as much attention as, say, the Monkey Island stuff, but they're really good games. I think if you like the Monkey Islands, I think it's safe to say if you like those, you'd like the Simon games. Definitely different, but it's point and click classics. They also let's see, was this? I think this was Stig. He writes in about the Curse of Monkey Island. Speaking of Monkey Island, so, the Curse of Monkey Island and Maniac Mansion. Those games are now on GOG, and I noticed they've got a sale going on right now where you can pick up 1, 2, and 3 for basically $14, $13.97. I'm not sure how long that sale is going to last, though, so I would head over there And remember, if you want to pick up either one of these, since it's Good Old Games, if you use my affiliate link, and I'll post it in the show notes, a little bit of the, something like 5 cents or so from your purchase will go to support the show. And, it's a nice gesture. It doesn't cost you anything extra, so please use that affiliate link. And by the way, once you click the link, it saves it as a cookie. I don't really know the science, the technology behind this, but apparently it'll keep track of that, so you don't have to worry about using an affiliate link for every game. And then finally, Shane wrote in about this game called Encased. That's Encased. It's a modern single-player sci-fi post-apocalyptic isometric role-playing game. Adocious. Well, it's quite a mouthful. It's inspired by the likes of Fallout 1 and 2 and the story Roadside Picnic. I read that story not too long ago. Really interesting. I wish I could remember the name of the author of that. But anyway, definitely check out that story if you get a chance. Okay, so let's see. This is a game with turn-based combat. All the mechanics are designed to give players a large number of tactical choices, freedom of action, and an ability to approach each combat situation in a unique and creative way. And this is from Dark Crystal Games. Really cool name for a studio. And they don't say when this will be coming out, but it looks like probably sometime next year, definitely after the first quarter. All right, I think that will do it for the news. What about that ale of the week? Yes. Ooh, what about that ale? What do we have over here? We have a smokestack series bourbon barrel quad. It's ale aged in bourbon barrels with cherries. This is from the folks at the Boulevard Brewing Company out of Kansas City, Missouri. Or do they say Missouri? It probably depends on how much of this they've consumed. Let's see, 11.8% alcohol, so a little on the strong side with that. Probably about twice what you might see in a macro brew. Let's see, based loosely on the Smokestack Series 6 glass, this Abbey style, he had me at Abbey style, quadruple after fermentation on cherries, separated into a number of oak bourbon barrels where they age for varying lengths, sometimes as long as a year. Selected barrels were then blended for optimum flavor. The resulting ale retains only a very subtle hint of the cherry, with toffee and vanilla notes coming to the fore. Let's see, very small batches. When they're gone, they're gone. More information at boulevard.com. So I've had a lot of Boulevards. They seem to have quite the distribution here in Minnesota. So I think I've pretty much tried all of them. So I was really excited about this special release. I like the Abbey ales. I love the quads. I like the bourbon barrels. I'm like, damn, it's got it all. Anyway, we'll see if it lives up to those expectations. So let's get this open and see what it's all about. All right, once again, I have the cork game. I love these games of precision. A lot of my friends like to go out and play pool, but I've always been more of the, well, I'll play Big Buck Hunter Pro if they got that, but otherwise I will be at the darts, trying to hit the bulls. Love playing darts and cricket, but I'm not so good at this game. I've never managed to hit the camera. Now you might ask, why would I want to do that? That sounds pretty stupid, but I am a stupid person. All right, let's see if I can get it this time. It's a little tricky to just, there we go. Okay, here we go. Use the force, Matt. Can I do it? Oh, what was that? What was that? Oh, that was embarrassing. That's what that was. Anyway, whew. Oh, that cork is, man, you can smell this from across the room. Anyway, let's get this poured and see what it's all about. All right, so I got some of this bourbon barrel quad here in the rather excellent drinking horn. I've been smelling it. It's got a very nice aroma to it. You definitely smell that bourbon from the barrel aging process. It almost smells like a glass of wine. Yeah, if I didn't know what this was and somebody just say, hey, sniff this and tell me what it was, I'd probably say that must be some bourbon barrel-aged wine, or champagne even, rather than beer. But anyway, it's a very nice smell, so let's give it a taste. Oh, wow, this is just super smooth. You definitely pick up on those, I guess you'd call it that Abbey style, which to me is always kind of a peachy, citrusy kind of a flavor. But then you also get that bourbon from the bourbon barrel process. Maybe a little bit of the sweetness is coming from the cherries. I think they're right on their label, though. Definitely don't taste like this strong cherry flavor. You know, sometimes these bourbon barrel-aged, I do love the style, but sometimes it can almost be sickly sweet. I think this one, they really nailed it. So it's just the right amount of sweetness, just the right amount of smokiness. I'll try it one more time. Yeah, it's a really good stuff. It got a lot of complexity to the flavor. It's really interesting how you taste it, and 1 minute you're tasting one thing, wait a couple seconds later and you're tasting something else. But anyway, very pleasant, very smooth, very refreshing. What was it, like 11% alcohol, something like that? I don't even really taste any alcohol in this at all. So really nice, no unpleasant fumes. I mean, it's really just a really, really good choice. If you do like the bourbon barrel flavor, you like the quad style Abbey, I think you'd be really impressed with this Boulevard. I'm going to go full 5 out of 5 drinking horns on it. They did say that it was a limited release, so I don't know whether you'll be able to find this in your area or not, but I hope you do, because I think you will enjoy it. All right, let's wrap it up then with a quotation. I was looking for quotes about storytelling, and I found one by the Nigerian poet Ben Okri, and I really think this is it's a really interesting thought. And I think it actually applies pretty well to adventure game stories. Well, anyway, it goes something like this. The fact of storytelling hints at a fundamental human unease, hints at human imperfection. When there is perfection, there is no story to tell. So ponder on that and see you guys next week.
That's what passes for wit on board our ship.